Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Stony Hill Advisors presentation today for Maximize Your Business Value and Exit Options. I'm Lori Barkman. Paul Vasoki and I are really excited you're here. This is a super important topic. As you might be well aware, 100% of business owners are going to leave a company one day, but very few of them have planned for that event. Getting your business ready is a lot of work. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to dive into a bunch of things that are going to make you think. Get your pen and paper because there's a lot to cover. First, some quick introductions. I am a partner with Stony Hill Advisors, and I'm excited to share my experience with you today so that you can benefit from what we are seeing in the market. I'm a former CEO that's gone through an M&A transaction. And so I know what that looks like and feels like. And it's exciting, but it's good to have someone on your side that's been through the process. My focus with Stony Hill as an M&A advisor is working with companies of all different sizes in different industries, but a focus, business services, industrials, and technology. And I'm also the host of a podcast called Succession Stories. And with me is Paul Vasoki. Paul, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. I'm the founder. I started Stony Hill in 2010, so it's my 12th year. My goal at the time, after looking at the statistics around the business owners in this country, there's so many. And at the time, the number was estimated to be between 4 and 6 million business owners who were baby boomer generation born, and so they were quickly aging, and I thought there's an opportunity. So I started the business, and we have other brokers besides partners with me. Besides Lori, we have people in New Jersey, Ohio, Connecticut, New York, Delaware, Maryland. So we've been expanding over the last few years, given the opportunity. Our focus is primarily businesses between 1 million in revenue and 50 million in revenue. And that target is mostly because these businesses are generally profitable and are have the opportunity to be sold. And they have a series of employees, and we're very conscious of the fact that if the business owner doesn't sell and instead chooses to close the business, those employees are then looking for a job. It may not be so bad right now with unemployment rate low, but it's over time, you don't want to leave your employees on the street. So we think we're helping these business owners not only achieve a retirement, but also helping their employees stay engaged. So we have a series of services available from, I'll start with business valuations. That's a complement to what we do, but our primary focus is intermediary transactions for both sell side and buy side. Our buy side work oftentimes is to help a business owner in the process of preparing the business for exit. Buying another company is a very, very good way to grow your business in the final stage process to get it big enough to make its value increase. And that ties back to our exit value planning. We work with business owners to help them understand where the business is, back to valuations, and then what they need to do to get it more valuable. And it takes time. So we have a planning service that we help business owners grow their business over that last 3 to 5 years.
Thanks for that, Paul. So today's agenda, we're going to cover a few things with you today. We're going to talk about what drives the value of a company. And these are things, by the way, that will help you run a more effective business along the way. So it isn't just about the exit, it's about the journey. We're going to talk about transition readiness. We're going to talk about exit options and the mergers and acquisitions selling process, what helps drive that value, get a little more detail. We'll talk about some dynamics of a deal and things to think about for next steps. As we go through this, you may have questions, and if you want to note those questions in the chat box, feel free to do so. We'll be looking at that later at the end of the presentation in our Q&A section. So first, a question for all of you, and if you want to use the chat, just go right on in and place a vote here. Company A, Company B, which one is worth more? Company A and B are similar. They're both B2B service companies. They're both 10 years old, and they both are driving the same amount of revenue. Company A has a higher profit percentage at 15% versus 10. And company A, most of their revenue is coming from projects. For company B, the projects are, it's project revenue and recurring revenue split about 50-50. In company A, the owner is very highly involved day to day. And in company B, it's an absentee owner. They're not there day to day. They're more arm's length. Company A is using QuickBooks, a very popular financial system, accounting system, and company B has a CPA reviewing their financials. Which company is worth more? Go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. Those of you who are not sure, that's okay, because it's really, that's why we're here, to help you figure out, well, what are some of the reasons why company A would be worth more than B? And actually, it's not that case. B is worth more. And the primary driver of that is it has to do with recurring revenue. The predictability of future cash flows is a really big reason. We're going to talk about some of these value drivers a little bit deeper later in the presentation. So 2 questions for you to consider, really, as we think about this and exit planning and trying to get our heads around it, trying to find that clarity. 2 questions before you exit your business at the very highest level. Is your business ready to sell? And are you personally ready to exit? These are really great questions to ponder. And we think of it as a 3-legged stool. There's business readiness, there's financial readiness, and there's personal readiness. And all of these legs of the stool are important, because if we're only considering one and not the other, we might find that we have to rewind and get our heads around, really, this is about goal setting. And this is being clear what's important to you as an owner and other owners in the business. Getting your business ready in a saleable shape with a very clear transition plan is a big crux of this conversation today. And how do we maximize business value and de-risk the business so that you can get the maximum return on your investment of time? Financial readiness is having a plan, understanding what might be your biggest asset, which is your company. It could be real estate associated with the business also, and understanding what that business is worth for you and what it means to you personally. Maybe your name is on the door. Maybe you're the founder. Maybe it's a multi-generational company and you want to think about the future of that business staying in the hands of the family. Whatever the goals are, it's important to articulate them so that we're clear and we can work backwards in what we call kind of reverse engineering, setting your goals in advance and working backwards to achieve that. And also thinking forward, having that future vision of what comes after you leave the company. This can be very, very difficult for owners, especially if they've spent a lot of time and hands-on energy to build this company, especially if it's from scratch. And we appreciate that. And we take the time with our clients to think through all 3 areas of this readiness. So to put this out there, can an owner's personal readiness to exit, to leave the company, to transition, can it be tied to the value of their business? Why are we asking this question? Well, it's because it's how we perceive the business state. And so to kind of get our heads around this, a question for you, if you would please in the chat, I want to see what your thoughts are. When I say the word transition, what comes to mind? And so if you are answering in the Q&A, that's fine. Let's see if we can enable chat. The Q&A area is the place to put it. So if you can, what comes to mind quickly, just don't think too hard, and whatever words rattle them off. Okay, so I'll read them as they come in. So we've got change. We're having an issue with the chat function. Apparently, there's a Q&A button if you want to use that function. Okay, some people are saying solid team. These are more positive words. When I do business sessions with CEOs and I ask them this question, A lot of times the words come up, they can be negative associations like fear or uncertainty, or they're worried about whether they're going to see the value. And so those words can have more of a negative connotation. Sometimes they're more neutral. Change in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But sometimes things are more positive, especially when you have that future vision. So how does this tie to business value? It ties to business value because if there's a health concern, if there's a divorce, if there's a death, though that can create a more negative situation around the business and why the business needs a change of ownership. And more positive association can be about this future planning, creating the value and getting ready and being proactive and part of that change. So personal crisis or personal motivators, somewhere in the middle. Sometimes when you've reached a peak professionally, you're just ready to move on. Again, we can find in the data that we've seen about a 6% swing on some positive factors for you personally, having a nice impact on the business value. The other part of this three-legged stool is financials. And we do assessments on all three aspects with our clients, especially as a way to get started in this journey, is assess where you are today on the business readiness, personal readiness, and financial. On the financial side, this is just a very, very quick shorthand of some of the things we'll take a look at, which is what is your freedom point? What is the point at which your value of the business is close to what you need it to be if you were going to sell, so that net number achieves what you need for your future lifestyle once you leave and move on. Maybe you want to start another company. Maybe you want to travel around the world. Maybe you want to spoil your grandkids for 20 years. Whatever your goal is, you're going to have a number, a big number that we'll write down on a piece of paper, seal it in an envelope, and put in a drawer and say, yeah, that's the number we want to achieve one day. What's that wealth that we need to create to reach our freedom point? And many times we have a gap. Paul's going to talk about that.
You have control when you advance it. Okay. When we're doing the planning this, as Laurie just described, with a business owner, we try to focus on a 3 to 5 years lead time to get started in preparing the business for exit. There's a lot of rationale to that we found over time. One of the key things, and value drivers you'll hear later about the what's called hub and spoke, and it's just basically the business being independent of the owner so that the business can continue without that owner. And it sometimes takes 3 or even as much as 5 years to find your replacement, train that replacement. Sometimes have failure and somebody not working out and moving on, so you got to start over. So that's one of the key things. But the other things take time too, especially because you're running the business and you can't spend 100% of your time working on the business because you still need to be in the business doing the day-to-day. So it's a gradual process of doing that. And when you get into you've done the preparation work, well, approximately 1 to 2 years ahead of time, you have to then make a decision. Is the timing now? Do you want to begin to consider taking the business to market? And we'll talk about the various choices you have in doing that. And then the actual process will take 6 months and sometimes 2 years to find the right buyer, conclude the negotiation, get paid, then move on to your retirement. So the whole thing is you have to think a little ahead of time. It's not like, decide I want to sell my business next Tuesday. It doesn't work that way. You have to think ahead, and that's very, very critical. So the primary exit options that we see are threefold: strategic buyers, financial buyers, and what we call related buyers. I'll start with the related buyers. Obviously, people think in terms of letting management come and take over the business after you're ready to retire. That's easy to say, but hard to do because the management has to find the funds to buy your business from you. And oftentimes they're not in a position to save enough to make it worth, and a very valuable business, they don't have enough to make it worthwhile for you to take their offer. partner buy-in or buyout is another way when there's 2 or 3 people running a business. The partners might have an opportunity to go get the funding and buy you. That's very valuable in a partnership. Family like management is also very questionable sometimes because you can't just give your offspring or cousin the business, because you're putting your retirement in their hands. And as we just saw through the pandemic, there are various outside factors that impact the business going forward. And if you haven't asked them to come up with the funding to buy your business, you might be wondering what happened to it when you get it back. And it's not worth what it was when you gave it to them. So you really need to plan that ahead of time and work on the proper transition through acquisition, even from family. The last one that you may not know about, but it's employee stock option plan. It's actually having the employee community buy your business, and it's a stock option plan that's set up by the federal government to allow business ownership to be transferred to the employees. And one of the nice things about it is, as an owner of the business, you can still be the manager of the business, even if you've taken equity out, and you can take less than 100%. Sometimes you can go as low as 40% to qualify for an ESOP. We do that. We do that work around advisory services to help a business owner know whether an ESOP can work for them and if it's the right solution. To the other two, which is our primary focus, strategic buyers are the best buyer to find, typically because they actually pay more, because they have ways to make money from various consolidations of services. For instance, you don't need two of everything in the company. That you may have an opportunity to gain access to additional customers that you were trying to get access to over many years. Now you buy a company that has a key arrangement with those customers, and you increase the value of your business. So they see value in buying competitors. We look for competitors, and it's also true of complementary services, suppliers, and in fact, sometimes the customer will buy a supplier to ensure the supply. And that was somewhat true the last couple of years with the supply chain issues. If you could buy your supply chain, you got first opportunity to get access to what was being in short supply. There are many in our size businesses, 1 to 50 million in revenue. It takes a specific kind of financial buyer. Now, some of them are classically called private equity, which are investing monies that they've got from third parties, and they invest in buying companies. We don't see that much in our market because they buy bigger businesses, typically 5 million in EBITDA, if you know what that means. That's their minimum. So we'll work with businesses smaller than that. But we do sell to the add-on, to the private equity group business they already own, and they will buy an add-on, basically another strategic buyer using private equity money to buy a competitor, or some, the strategic process leads to adding on to what they're already doing. And then there are startups where there are people who want to own a business, and they get money sponsored by the private equity groups, and they're literally a single owner or a couple of people that want to buy and become entrepreneurs and own a business. And that's another very strong avenue in the lower middle market that we serve. Important chart here. I'll try to go through quickly. I mentioned partner buyouts already. There are many kinds. I mentioned the family and the family. Another one is family office investors, which is somewhat like a private equity group, but they're not investing third-party money from investors. They're investing their own money from the family. But one of the key advantages, they have a longer-term hold. Private equity group will buy a business and sell it in likely five years or so. Family offices may hold it forever. So back to strategic buyers. We see the opportunity to address them through oftentimes a debt issue. They can get a mezzanine debt, and they don't have to have all cash in their pocket to buy a business, because they have credit lines of their own, since it's an ongoing business on its own right. Financial buyers, it gets a little more difficult because they have to raise funds on a personal level, and they have to then proceed to provide the complete ability to run the business going forward. So that puts a question mark in some investors' minds or banks. Is this person capable of running the business? What's my risk factor for loaning money? Let's go on next one. Typically, and I kind of alluded to this, there are two kinds of transactions that we provide. One is the pure asset sale, selling the assets of the business in literal terms. And that includes not only real hard assets, equipment and machines and trucks and so on. It also includes soft assets like the customer list or intellectual property or access to a given marketplace where you have a presence or brand name that's known. So that they all add to an asset sale, and there are different tax advantages for either. That's another presentation on its own, but an asset sale is more common than an equity sale, and so we see a high majority of our transactions are asset sales. An equity sale is you're literally selling the stock in a privately held company, which can even be in an LLC, just the ownership rights to the business. But you're selling everything, including, in many cases, and there are ways to work around it, but in many cases, you're selling your liabilities. An asset sale doesn't transfer liabilities like a loan or even a potential lawsuit. An equity sale, you can get trapped with all those. So through creative negotiation, you can try to limit some of those, but some of them you can't. If you have a lawsuit coming through some negligence, you really can't be shielded from that as a buyer, because you're buying the business. So that a lot of people are concerned with equity sales, and they like asset sales better.
We're going to launch a poll for everyone. So the question is, which of the following describes your biggest fear when it comes to selling your business? Well, the votes are coming in, and I'll read them off once we end the poll. So there's different answer choices. People are thinking about whether they're not going to get the value they think your business is worth, which is pulling in the highest rank at the moment, followed by the last choice, which is the legacy that you've built will not continue or will change from what you would like it to be. And then the ones in the middle are kind of split amongst the three of them. So we've got a good amount of people participating. I'll give it a couple more seconds, and then I'll show you the results. Okay, so here we are. Let me share this. Hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, about 65% of you said your biggest fear is not getting what your business is worth, followed by the legacy concerns, disappointing your employees. No one can run things as well as you can, and not having anything to do in retirement. So thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on that. One of the things that we get asked a lot is, well, what helps determine the value of a business? Now, this is not a valuation presentation. We're happy to go in a little more detail about how business valuations work. We offer that as a service. A lot of times it comes down to intangible things in addition to your financials. And Paul alluded to that a little bit earlier. So I'll run through these, at pretty high level. And if we have questions, of course, you can put it in the Q&A. So the first and foremost being your financial performance, your size of your company, the level of profits that you are driving into the business, as well as the quality of your record keeping. The growth potential that your business has is also important. While we are looking at your financial history to determine your performance from the past, really in the private company markets, what buyers care about is the predictability of future cash flow. So they're looking at the potential of your business to bring that value to them, however they choose to value it. In the public markets, we can go to Yahoo Finance and we can look up the value of the business. In a private market, It's really in the eyes of the buyer, just like two houses. How do those two houses on the same street, same size, why do they have different values? So the growth potential of your business, the rate of growth that you've shown in the past, and that predictability going forward is important. Operational dependence, how reliant is the business on its owner, and what risks is it facing in three core areas? Key employees, of which the owner might be one of them, but also, what's the strength of your management team? When you have a transferable business, you have a transferability of people, of processes, and all kinds of assets. And here we want to look at risks. Are we facing any particular risks in this business when we have a transfer, whether it's contracts, whether it's any customer concentration issues we need to be concerned of? What happens if we lose a key customer? Will that shutter the doors? What happens if we lose a key supplier? So operational dependence on those three areas in particular is what we take a look at. The cash position, how much working capital is needed to run the company? What's the capital expenditure requirements? And for buyers that are getting a commercial loan, sometimes lenders, SBA lenders, they have concerns about certain categories of businesses for their ability or concerns they might have about repayment of the loan. And they publish ratios of what that business should be returning for cash flow versus borrowed monies. And so this is where the working capital number and requirements for the business is really important in your ability to get a line of credit. Recurring revenue, and it's different than reoccurring with an O. Recurring revenue, contracted subscriptions, something like a Netflix where you put your credit card in and you have to tell that company that you are no longer going to purchase from them, as opposed to going out and getting a renewal. So recurring revenue businesses do have a higher value because of the predictability of future cash flows. Repeat, long-standing, those are all really important. And there's certainly a metrics around churn and customer acquisition that relates to customer satisfaction that we'll also take a look at. Competitors and differentiation, how differentiated is your company in the market? What makes it special? What's that secret sauce? And how is your ability to drive profits at a higher rate than your competitors? How are you swinging above the fences, hitting that home run? Owner involvement, again, from an owner standpoint, transferability is really key here. A business that is over reliant on its owner. When's the last time you took a vacation? And when you were on vacation, did you check email? Did you check voicemail? What would happen if you weren't in the business for 90 days or longer? Would it thrive without you? Would it just stagnate, or would it decline? And if COVID has taught us nothing else, it's to make sure that we are really mindful of these things, because we never know what can happen. As we think about the transferability of a business, it exacerbates it even more when a business is over reliant on one particular person. And customer satisfaction is an indicator of not only how happy your customers are with you, which is great. Are we measuring that, or is it anecdotal? We might have Google reviews, we might have a net promoter score, something that's measured over time. That's a nice benchmark to have. Again, the metrics of customer acquisition and churn also tell a story around some of your financials and customer demand and ability to drive business. So there are many drivers that can move the needle up or down in terms of value. And when it comes to the size of the company, it is true that smaller companies might have a bit of a discount applied to them. Why is that? Because there is a greater degree of perceived risk in smaller companies if they have a high reliance on one particular person, which is the owner. And so we do see a relationship between size and risk based on the size of the business. And one way to think about it is in terms of the revenue. Another way to look at things is, well, we want to make sure that we are positioning the business for success. We're positioning it for a transition. And sometimes it doesn't go our way. Not all businesses sell. That is a truth. Sometimes they liquidate. Sometimes the owner will just close the door. And the biggest reason for that is there can be a disconnect between what the sellers are looking for in terms of price and what the buyers are ultimately willing to pay. Sometimes the sellers might represent the company a certain way, And when the buyer gets into due diligence, it looks a little bit differently. So what we try to do is work with owners when their time is on your side to make the differences in your business so that we can avoid some of those situations. Now, in terms of opportunities and what we see for deals, there can be really nice wins. A deal is structured, as Paul said, by the owner having a dialogue, not only with an advisor, but ultimately creating that relationship on the buy side to understand what's important, and creating a win-win is what we try to seek. It doesn't always go that way. You know, sometimes things go in another direction. The challenges that can face a deal is when there is a disconnect on the value of the business. There can be a discount applied by the buy side because of things that they'll learn in diligence. There can be other aspects of a deal. It's not just the purchase price per se, but it's also other things like earnouts and what's the time that an owner would stay on with the business to transition. Is that consulting? Is it full-time? Are there other metrics tied to the value of the business, but they're paid out on a contingency, such as a revenue target or a profit target? There can be clawbacks and other things that might go into the deal that might give pause as to whether or not this is something to pursue. What we try to do is look at all aspects of a deal and again, try from a win-win standpoint, provide that value as an intermediary to make sure that your goals and needs are being met and heard. So Paul's going to take it from here.
Okay. The statistic at the top line is interesting. And I find it to be very, very true. 98% of the business owners don't know their company's value. And mostly it's because they don't know it because they think it's worth more than it really is in the market. So it's important to know the value of your largest asset. In a small business marketplace that we're serving, so many business owners invest all of the profits back into the business. And that's understandable. It's how you grow. You buy a new piece of equipment or you hire some people. Well, because you're never taking the money out, that's your largest asset. You don't have money in a bank account or in the stock market. So you really need to know what that's worth to ever plan for retirement. The goal is to de-risk the business. That's what we do in our exit value planning process, which by removing risk factors, and we know what buyers view as risk factors, we coach you through the process of those things that can be adjusted or removed, and that increases value. Then through the valuation process, we help you understand, well, this is what the market would pay for your business today. And if you, with your financial planners, think you need to have a higher return when you sell, then we need to go to work and we need to have time to do that. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the 3 to 5 year cycle. You need time to increase the value. And I also said one of the key processes is to buy a business. And surprisingly, most business owners in the small business marketplace, they're not acquisitive. They're mostly very shy about borrowing. But when you buy another company, and most of the times you buy a company either equal or smaller, that company is generating profits. And the profits of that company will pay for any loans you take to a great degree, if not 100%. So it's essentially paying for itself while you're growing bigger and integrating the value of that company into your company. It's paying for itself. And then it's important to have an exit plan and work on it on a regular basis. You can't just do it once, like any plan. It's a process. So you need to understand the exit channels I described earlier and the various options you have. So we're getting near the end, and a couple takeaways I'll mention. I might start sounding repetitive. Start exit planning when time is on your side. Please get to know what your business is worth by getting a true valuation, not what your neighbor told you he sold his business for. Then with the help of your financial advisor, know what number you think you need to retire, and then let's address the value gap and work on getting the value gap closed. If you again have time on your side, we can close it, and then discover the ways to de-risk your business. So part of, as I've been saying, the exit value plan, and it's truly about building value. It's not just purely an exit plan, but we focus on what are the value components, as Laurie mentioned, the value drivers. So we recommend starting with a business valuation. Let us help you assess the strengths and weaknesses and risks of your business. Develop that exit map, know what the channels to exit are, who that could be a likely buyer, and then prepare for due diligence. That's another thing. Oftentimes people wait till the last second, and it takes time to get all the data needed for due diligence. And you really don't want to do that when you have an offer, because you're trying to negotiate the offer, you're trying to get your due diligence documentation together, and you're trying to keep it confidential from your employees. And 99% of the time, employees don't know the business is going through the process, and you're still trying to run the business. So it's like juggler. You can't keep all those balls in the air constantly. So if you start early and do your due diligence as part of your exit plan, you'll be much better off when the time comes with an offer. We've been mentioning the idea of valuation. So for those who have attended today, we have decided to make an offer of reducing our fee for valuation to $4,000. So if you have an interest in getting your business valued, just send us an email, info@stonyhilladvisors.com, and we'd be glad to help you.
So we're going to take a look at the questions that have already come in the Q&A function here. We have a couple, and so please take a moment if you have a question that's on your mind to put it in, and we'll run through these. So let's start with one question that came in asking if we offer a personal readiness assessment. The answer is yes. I'm a certified value builder. I have a value builder, we call it the pre-score. And if anyone is interested in that, I'm more than happy to go through that with you. I think it's a great exercise. You'll get an ebook that's has a wonderful set of exercises in them. And if you're interested in working with us for exit value planning, this is part of the package that we offer to go through this assessment. And it's the 3 legs of the assessment too. So there's the personal, the business, and the financial. So thanks for asking that question. Another one that got asked is for exit options, what if the goal is to keep the business operational? Couldn't a competitor just buy the business for the phone number and inbound leads? Couldn't they choose to dissolve the business? Paul, do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. Well, we think no competitor would want to pay a true value of the business for just your phone number and close the business. That sounds like a very unwise investment for your competitor. And by the way, you don't have to sell to anybody. So if you suspect the competitor is even thinking of that, don't take their offer. Tell them to move on, and we'll find someone else. So you're not forced into making that decision. But when we're representing a client to sell, oftentimes we'll be told certain potential buyers are off limits. We're instructed not to approach them, and that's fine. If there's a problem, we'll just move on.
So thanks for that. Another question is, if it's a service business with no recurring revenue, can 55 years of business records work instead? This is an interesting question. So if we literally answer it for the aspect of recurring revenue, I think we take it at face value, which is it recurring revenue or reoccurring? In this case, because you have 55 years of business records and you're asking this way, I'm assuming that the question is really asking about business relationships and whether or not that business has handshake deals or papered contracts. It would be my question back to the attendee. And if it's not papered contracts, but they are handshakes, I can say from my own work experience over the years that sometimes you have changes in control and you have changes of personnel. People leave, people move on. And imagine that you're the buyer. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer. How will the buyer perceive if there's any transition risk in those customer relationships? Are you able to literally hand them off because you have contracts? Are you able to hand them off successfully because you're going to transition those relationships? Are you asking the question perhaps because of the record keeping side? If you have a lot of years of record keeping and you can show longevity of relationships, and that means something too, so I don't want to discount that and just say, if it's not recurring, it's not worth something. I don't mean to say that. I think it's just, again, with the lens of the buyer, how predictable are those relationships in continuing forward so that the new buyer can benefit from the relationships that you've enjoyed in the current environment. Paul, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I would like to. Some businesses it's hard to have quote recurring revenue in a hard sense. You're a retailer and you have a great brand and everybody knows you have the best products, best food, best whatever in a retail environment. You have recurring revenue because people keep coming to your retail establishment to buy, and that comes into the minds of the buyer because that's important for them in making the decision. So the brand has value that addresses recurring revenue, and I think Laura, you mentioned the word reoccurring. That's really a bunch of reoccurring revenue from various customers that are coming back for more.
Yeah, my interior decorator knows that every year I might spend $5,000. She doesn't know when. She doesn't know for sure that it's going to happen. So that's how I like to describe reoccurring. Is it happens, but you're not really sure about it. Someone's asking if we'll be providing access to the presentation deck, and they're taking notes, which is fantastic, and they've missed some information on the slides. This deck will be uploaded to YouTube, so you'll be able to rewatch it and take notes at your convenience. So we'll be sure to share that out. Okay, another question is, can you get value out through a merger versus a sale? You want to take that one, Paul?
Yes. A merger and a sale, oftentimes they're not different at all. When I was referring before to strategic buyers, that generally speaking is a merger. They're buying your business and merging it with their business to take advantage of the synergies of the two companies together. So a merger is not something different than a sale. It is part of it's another way to execute a sale. And it's it gets down to how is the value transferred. Sometimes a merger might be through a stock purchase, which and we do represent businesses that they don't sell 100%. Well, the previous owner and company are a subsidiary of a bigger company, and they still have ownership in that big, and they have what they call a second bite of the apple. They have ownership in the bigger company for another transfer of ownership later on at a higher value because the company that bought you is bigger than what you were. So there's a whole series of scenarios that come into play.
So a couple of questions have come in around valuations, what's included in a valuation, how long does it take, what does it cost? We know we've shared that cost of the discounted offer for those of you who are in attendance today or watching this in a recording. So we'll talk through this, and if you have more questions, we can certainly talk with you offline. The process for doing a valuation takes about 3 weeks, I'd like to say. It could be shorter, it could be longer, depending on the preparations and the questions that come up with a client. But let's just say kind of a standard timeline is about 3 weeks. And what we do is we will give you a list of information that we'll need to prepare, which typically is the last 3 years of tax returns, company tax returns, and your current year P&L and financials. We will also ask you a series of questions about the business in terms of expenses that might be one time or revenue that might be one time. And what we're trying to discern as part of our process is whether to do adjustments on those. And the reason why is because we have to put ourselves in the seat of the buyer, that the buyer might make different decisions should they own the business. So for example, with loans and interest payments, they might make different decisions. So interest payments are considered an add back as an example. It also, if you have a company expense for landscaping and the landscaper comes to your house and all of that is paid for by the company, we need to really isolate those expenses that might be flowing through the business that a different owner, again, would make different decisions. So we go through that process. From a valuation methodology. There's 3 different methodologies that are available to us most commonly. And these are the ones that we tend to focus on in our practice and working with clients to help them understand a market-based valuation is to do market comps. We'll look at comparative transactions, more recent transactions. We like to look at the last 5 years. We'll look at in your industry. We'll look at the value drivers. What are those reasons? And so if you remember that slide where I had a lot of information on there about different value drivers, we'll do an assessment with you to understand where you might be punching above your weight class and where you might not. And so that's another lever that we use in the process. So a valuation process is part art, part science. There's definitely math and spreadsheets, and we use that. We certainly use those, but it's also the recognition that there might be some reasons why your business would yield a higher multiple versus a competitor. And in the math, we always want to know, if you say, oh yeah, my friend down the street, he or she sold his company for 4 times. Well, the next question should be 4 times what? And we answer that question for you. It'll be 4 times of a number, and we'll explain how we did that math. And another question that came in is, do we work on a flat fee basis or a contingency basis? And that question is probably most relevant answered around sell side or buy side. For a valuation, we do that as a standalone service. And again, we've put a flat fee on that. When it's an engagement to work with you to sell your company, as an example, we do work up front with it's a payment that helps us get started. So for that payment, you are getting a number of things. 1, your valuation could be included in that if we haven't already done that work for you. 2, we are working on the pre-M&A getting ready. And this work is really, really important. So not only for the valuation, but also getting the business ready for marketability, and also then headed forward in the marketing with the buyers and Q&A and due diligence. So that takes some time to get ready. We prepare documents for you. One in particular is called a confidential information memorandum, or a CIM or SIM. A teaser, which is also important in getting the information out there. We're assessing how to market the business. We're working with you collaboratively on the strategy. So are these strategic buyers we're going after? Are they financial buyers we're going after? What exit options, which channels are we thinking about? And we put together the research and create the list for who we're inviting to the table, and we manage all of that. And so the success fee is based on contingency. So it's a combination of an upfront payment, but the majority of that payment is on a contingency, or what we call success fee. And as Paul said, sometimes this process can take a year or longer. So of the time we're putting in, there's a lot of value being provided over that time. And I think our clients find that our pricing is pretty consistent with others in the market. And also you get a lot of value for our time. Okay, Paul, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I just make comment that the retainer is actually applied to the success fee, so you get it back. It's just essentially an advance that we're using to commit to all the work we're going to do before we're successful, and then we give it back to you.
Okay, another question of with respect to asset versus equity sale, how are operating equipment lease liabilities treated? You want to jump in on that one?
No, why don't you repeat that one? I didn't see anything.
With respect to an asset or an equity sale, how are operating equipment lease liabilities treated?
Oh, okay. It's a good question. It's a little bit of a trick question. In an asset sale, the lease is negotiated in the transfer of ownership of the lease, because the lessor of the equipment has a say in who gets to take the equipment over, and whether or not the next owner is able to negotiate a deal with the lessor. Then it may be something that has to be paid off, and then the buyer of the business has to then acquire the business or acquire the equipment on a new lease. So it really becomes subject to the negotiation at the time of transfer. In a stock sale, it's actually the ownership, the lease gets transferred because it's the company's stock value, including all liabilities, and that's a liability, gets transferred and a stock sale. So it actually moves forward unless the lessor has a non-transfer clause of some kind.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at some other questions we have here. I know we got about 10 minutes left, and thank you so much. There's been some really nice questions in here. I don't know that we'll have time for all of them, and I'm gonna just make sure that I keep our contact information up on the screen so that if at any time you want to send us an email, you please do so, because again, we might not get to all of these. Also, just a quick note, if you are interested in other resources, we have an upcoming webinar on the 20th of September, which is a week from now. And we'll be talking about ESOPs, which is employee stock ownership plans. And then also, just if you want to tune in to Succession Stories podcast, it's available wherever you listen to your favorite shows on YouTube and successionstories.com. And like I said, I'm the host, and also very grateful Stony Hill Advisors is our lead show sponsor. So again, here's our contact information. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I hope you all can join us next Tuesday for the ESOP presentation, because we find that not that many people understand the intricacies of it. And there's so many advantages if it works for your business. One that you'll find out, we'll mention, is if you convert your after transfer to your employees, if the business is converted to an S corp, it operates on a tax-free basis. The federal government has cannot tax their business any longer, and that pays back all the cost of doing the ESOP. So that there are so many, and that's just one example. So there's many things to learn there. But we welcome any comments, emails, phone calls, whatever. We hope that this was informative for you, and let's stay in touch.
We have a couple more questions we have time for. I'll just go through these. One person's asking about the different industries that we serve, particularly for consulting and technology services. The answer is yes. What we find is that our process is a valuable process and consistently applied across any number of industries. You are the subject matter experts for your company. We collaborate with you upfront and all throughout the process to make sure that we're representing you and marketing your company as effectively as possible to the potential buyers. So for consulting, absolutely. Technology, absolutely. And as we mentioned in our introduction, really a broad array of industries that we support. Another question is around exit options and succession planning to family and creating an overall plan. A couple questions have come in around this. And so in particular, the goal for us would be to pass the business to family or management, but want to consider options. Would you also be able to help us plan for succession that doesn't consider selling outright? We do this, yes. We do it in the context of what I'd call strategic exit value planning, because we're looking at your business in the next time horizon, whatever that is for you. I have a client, I just met with him yesterday. We're talking about a 10-year time horizon. And there's different milestones that he wants to be achieving. And even though he has 10 years, and that sounds like a long runway, we were already thinking about the bridge from where we are today to where he wants to be. And he wants to increase his revenue 5 times over where they are right now. So that's a pretty hefty slope to jump up. And again, the more the time is on your side, the more options you can create. So that's the context of how we do like to work with clients, is help them figure out what options exist, pros and cons of those options. Even as Paul said, taking a look at ESOPs and taking a look at what else could be on the table, because you never know when option 1 is you think you're going to go through that option, and then it just, for whatever reason, a blocker's come up and you got to go to option 2 or option 3. So yeah, Paul, anything you want to add to that?
No, we do provide advisory services to family successions, and we try to guide the owner who's passing the business to someone else on the risk factors. I kind of mentioned earlier that we recommend you get someone who's going to take over, even a family member, to get some funding and buy the business. But if you want to be the bank, that's a risk factor that you need to understand the risk you're taking and how long it'll take to get paid back, and what happens if the business is not performing. Do you take it back? And there's a lot of stuff in there that we would work with your attorney to make sure that you're as protected as possible.
Someone's wondering if on the getting ready to sell side of things, which again, we would say this is advisory and coaching and working with you over a period of time, how much does it cost for that part, or what does it depend on? And what we would love to do is meet with you one-on-one, learn a little bit more about your business, and we could talk a little bit more specifically. But generally speaking, this is a kind of an advisory consulting on an ongoing basis. And our fees are, I guarantee you, you're going to get an ROI from what we talk about. But if we try to make it, reasonably value priced. So we can talk offline more specifically about how much it costs to do that.
I noticed one question. I want to jump on it. If the next owners are already chosen and the company is not being sold, can you still help with succession planning? I think this would apply for, we have a service we call facilitation. It's basically when a buyer and a seller have essentially agreed one will buy the other, the buyer is going to buy the business, but they are still negotiating a price, and they need to have advice on due diligence and the process of negotiating the agreement. So we primarily on the buy side, we will help facilitate that transaction and protect the interests of the seller, because there's a lot there. You've never done it before. We have the experience to kind of say, don't do that, but maybe, we can agree to some of these other things, and we'll just keep you out of hot water.
We have a couple of questions that are around confidentiality, and obviously there can be a lot of different parties that you'd want to protect, right? So having these agreements in place is step one, and we do manage that on the buy side and sell side. So one question was about at what point do we ask potential buyers to sign a confidentiality agreement? Does that protect you from buyers contacting your customers or clients? So yeah, absolutely. This is a really important point. When we have a teaser is anonymous, so that can go to anyone. But if a potential buyer wants to see the confidential information memo, which is much longer, more deeper information, they need to sign an NDA for that. And there is no customer information typically shared until closing. That's a general practice. You don't want to share. So let's say you have computer code. You're not going to share the computer code until closing, right? You're not going to give away your secret sauce. And if your secret sauce is your customer list, you really don't want to share that until the time is right. So that's just one example. There really shouldn't be any concern there. There might be some customer names that you want to share, and it's public information already, and that's certainly fine, and that's up to you. And that information is what we collaborate with you on in the process. Another question was around how do you keep information confidential amongst the marketplace? Now that's a little bit different because we're relying on human beings to honor their word, and we can't ultimately control that. If for some reason you need to get litigious and sue a party that has violated their NDA, obviously you could make that choice. But we're trusting that these companies are going to follow their word that they've signed off to in these agreements. And can there be loose lips? Absolutely. So can we do everything to stop that? I mean, we can't be sitting with those people 24/7. We can't control that. So we have to trust the process, and that, ultimately that they will keep things confidential. If you're very, very concerned about, let's say it's a competitor, that is a dynamic we do see. There's a lot of sensitivity around competitors sharing information. Completely understand those concerns. And we can design maybe through the process of due diligence of what is able to be reviewed in due diligence and what isn't.
And also sometimes we're asked to submit a list of anybody who is requesting access to the confidential information and get a quick okay to send it to that person. So we don't want to get through the complete qualification every time we have someone asking about the client, but we can identify a list of people that you don't want to know your business is on the market.
We'll take this one last question and then we'll thank everyone for coming. So the question is can we help find potential buyers? The answer is yes. We have different databases as resources available to us. We also, all of our advisors have extensive networks in different private equity market Rolodexes, and it's a marketplace that we can do our research. That's why you want us on your team, to do the research to try to find the buyers based on geography, based on market industry, industry segments, size, whatever those factors are that we think that those are great targets. And we put those lists together and we use that in our process. Paul, anything you want to add, closing thoughts before we sign off?
I come back to one question before. Whenever we're engaged, or actually in the very first conversation we have with a potential client, we establish confidentiality agreement between ourselves and that client. So that's the first thing we do, because that starts the process of keeping everything very confidential. So we honor that from the very first call, or very first conversation on the phone, or whatever way we connect.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We had a tremendous response to this webinar. We will continue to offer it. We appreciate your time. We hope that you got a lot of value from it, and we invite you to follow up with us and connect, and stay tuned for more. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you all.